Welcome everyone to the second or first episode of the podcast, depending how you count. We more or less followed up on the advice from the first episode or the zeroth podcast, whatever you want to call it. So we're the Brothers. We're the Wiki Brothers. I almost forgot the name. I'm Frank.
And I'm Milo. You just misspoke and you almost said Wiki Boys, which
Yes.
honestly would have been even a better name.
It would not be bad, but we're not the Wiki Boys. We're the Wiki Brothers, as a matter of fact.
yes, we are. We are.
Yes. And just like we mentioned last time, the concept is as follows, is that every episode we discuss one more or less random Wikipedia article. One of us reads it thoroughly and reads a bit more about it, and one of us doesn't read too much about it, so that we have a bit of almost an interview setup. And I have read quite a bit about our today's article.
And today's article is about the lifeboat, specifically the rescue lifeboat.
Exactly, specifically the rescue one. There's also another one, which is shipboard. That's the one that are on the ships, but we're talking about rescue lifeboats today.
And you might be wondering what could be asked or what could be told about rescue lifeboats. And honestly, I'm not so sure, but the Wikipedia page is quite long. There's apparently plenty to say about lifeboats, but my knowledge is still severely limited. So please, what can you briefly say about rescue boats or lifeboats?
Yes. I totally understand. It's a long article, but not necessarily the most super interesting information, you might say. So I digged a little deeper, and I found some great books. Just the concept of it, like one from 1894, called The Book of the Lifeboat, which was fun because it's published in England, so it has a mandatory picture of Queen Victoria in the front of the book. There's absolutely
nice.
no connection with it, and it has a great quote in the introduction, which I'd like to say, and they say, "It may be said that these facts about the lifeboats are pretty generally known, and that the lifeboat institution is so well established and appreciated for its services that its claims upon the public do not require to be further insisted upon. This is a false conclusion, has been fully proved, and it is questionable if even a small minority of those who do not live at the coast are acquainted with a smattering of the work that has to be done and the dangers and self-sacrifices yearly made by those who are the means, in the hand of Providence, of saving men and ships from destruction." So that was a pretty long quote, but I think it's fun because that is indeed what is happening. Like, lifeboats are pretty important. They save people and they prevent people from drowning. But in the end, what do we know about it? Very little.
Yeah, honestly, who cares? You know, anyone who's not in contact with lifeboats on a daily basis, who cares? The person who started this first half of the quote was probably living in a bubble, thinking that, or stating at least that these facts of lifeboats are generally well known.
They would hope it to be very well known by other people.
Yeah.
But indeed, not many people care, and the people who care, they live at the sea, or they have been rescued, or they are the rescuers. So, well, there's that. But on the other hand, like, it's not too different from firefighting. However, fires occur a bit more often than people drowning. And for that, we kind of care that they are here. But because we live pretty far from the coast or any dangerous coast, lifeboats are not our daily concern.
So you just said this book was from 1894. Is that what you
Yes.
said? So how far back do lifeboats go?
Not that far, honestly. Like, for most of the history, the idea of having like a dedicated lifeboat service at the coast was kind of nonsense. It's kind of a waste of resources because for most of the time you're not doing too much, and to be on standby for a long time costs quite a bit. What also didn't help is so like lifeboats for rescue, approximately 1800. That's how far we have to go to see them. By this time, we're not really in the Industrial Revolution, so it's just a sailboat or a rowboat. And
I
if
see.
the original boat, the one you want to rescue, was destroyed, then your own boat doesn't have the best chances.
No,
But
most likely not.
in 1784, you had Lionel Lukin, which I think is a really cool name. He invented, he called it an unsinkable boat, which is very useful if you want to rescue people. And it's just very simple. It uses a lot of cork and airtight compartments, so that it basically floats the whole time. But for some reason, that hadn't really been done before.
Wow.
So, this is
Uh,
how he starts. And he was just a guy who saw many people drown in the sea. Like he lived near the sea, and it pretty often happens that a boat crashes. Like the weather can be very bad, the seas can be very bad, and people then just die, and they don't like that. And he had pretty strong connections with the Prince of Wales, which could help, I think, because they this guy he paid for most of his inventions and invention work and stuff like that.
I this concept of an unsinkable boat. I think I've heard it in a more modern context as well. Like these boats which have a weight distribution which is so skewed towards the bottom that even if they flip over, they flip back up.
Hmm.
Is there somehow some
That's
relation?
that is definitely related because, as a matter of fact, most lifeboats which we use today have this feature that you just cannot let it sink. You cannot even put it the other way around. It will automatically and very quickly get the right side up. So we definitely developed upon that concept. But these boats from Lionel Lucan, they don't have that feature. They just are difficult to sink.
I see, and I just buy the materials and the blueprints of the boat.
Exactly. And there were some enthusiastic people in the neighborhood that thought like, oh, this could be useful. The problem was that it was still a pretty expensive idea to have a bunch of boats specifically for this purpose, and no one really picked up on it. But in not too much later, there was a big shipwreck near Newcastle, and the problem was that it was like 300 meters from the shore. It's like in the delta of the river, and there were a lot of people just watching how all these guys on the ship threw themselves in the sea and basically died, which was very traumatizing, I suppose, for all these guys. And then the public opinion shifted a bit more towards, oh, let's get some funds to have a dedicated lifeboat service.
So it was an emergency based
Yes,
development.
yes. After a disaster, there's a bit more support of funding this idea, and
Mm-hmm.
the capabilities were there, but it was not ideal. And as a matter of fact, um, a few decades later, the same thing happened on the same spot. And no, well, then the thing was that there was a rescue boat going to rescue the ships. So, well, that's at least an improvement. The problem was that the rescue boat itself sank as well, and everyone died on there, and there was no rescue boat for the rescue boat, which was kind of ironic.
Well,
Um,
I mean, if you want to build a rescue boat for a rescue boat, then that rescue boat would also need a rescue boat, and then you could go on for quite a long time. So at some
yes,
point, I
you
can
need to
imagine
stop.
that they just say, "This is the rescue boat. Boat. If they have a problem, then so be it."
Yes, you just need to build good rescue boats and get good funding, which was the problem because after these disasters, they got some funding to build some materials, to build some boats, have some people used for this. But after like 10 years, if there's no maintenance, well, it doesn't really work that well anymore. So after this incident, 15 years later, at the exact same spot, the same thing happened again, and people were kind of getting tired of it.
Yeah, I can imagine. So are rescue boats a mainly uh, British thing? Like, I mean, Britannia rules the waves, but do they uh, do they also rule the lifeboats, or is it?
The lifeboats. A good question. Now, of course, the concept of a lifeboat is not unique to England. It's just they wrote a lot about it, and this is where the Industrial Revolution a bit started. So they had a bit more resources to spare. And I read most of the stuff about the British lifeboats. There was also after one of these incidents, there was a lifeboat design competition, which is pretty interesting. Just the concept of it, and also great names participated, like Mr. Henry Greathead and
Mr. Henry
Mr.
Greathead.
Greathead, exactly, and Mr. William Woodhave. He also made like a self-righting boat.
That is absolutely
The
amazing.
Exactly, so great names. But also, like in China and the US, similar things happened. Many people died on the seas or on the rivers. In China, it was mostly the Yangtze River, and it seems so preventable at that point. Like before that, it's just something that happens. But when there's so many people at the shores, many experienced boatmen, you kind of want to create a dedicated service to rescue these people.
Yeah, of course. I mean, like you said, it's very similar to firefighting, and it seems uh, as soon as the concept of a firefighter was enacted, it seems to make no sense to live without them, even though you hardly ever need to use them
No,
yourself.
totally, totally. And what I found pretty interesting is that, from what I read, the first like rescue boat service was established again in England around 1776. But that was before there were even proper like lifeboats. You just had a few like boats that no one used that you could use for your rescue service, but they were absolutely not designed to rescue people. So that was not really a success.
So, what does a rescue lifeboat need in terms of design?
Yeah, good question. What you want to do is save people, so you need to have plenty of space, but you also need to realize that the boat that has trouble for a reason. Maybe it's tough weather, maybe it's something which for the boat itself, but you need to be prepared for pretty bad conditions. So in general, most of these rescue boats are pretty small. You don't want to send an entire oil tanker that way. That doesn't really work. And then especially the inland or inshore boats, which just go on calm waters, they're just really small. Think of like a typical rubber boat, so to say.
So, originally they used these old boats which no one used as rescue boats,
Yes,
and they used these old boats to drive into, in some sense, dangerous waters to save newer, more better maintained boats.
yeah, it just doesn't really sound that good. I think it was mostly enacted because people wanted a service like this, and not because people actually wanted to make a well-designed system of rescue boats. So in that era, loads of problems, loads of accidents. Only around like 1900s, there you have dedicated volunteer services and more just better designed boats. And that's also an interesting point. I saw that in many countries, still rescue missions for shipwrecks or something like that are run by volunteers, which kind
Wow.
of blows my mind. It's a 24-hour service, 7 days per week, and it's just local boatmen who feel connected to saving people this way. But like again, like a voluntary firefighting system, I don't really see how that works. It's a lot of pressure on you.
Yeah, exactly, and it's quite dangerous, and you
Hmm.
also can't just hire anyone. Like you need some, uh, at least some experts, people who know how to operate a boat, and people who know their way around water. Similar like how you want some qualities in some firemen at least. So
You want the best, yeah,
I can't
ideally.
imagine they have a great selection of volunteers to pick from. To be honest.
Exactly. It appears to work, but for example, in the US and Canada, this is just a job you're doing, and this is your full-time job. And I think that makes sense. Professionals.
Is
Well,
there a big difference between uh, the Americas and here in Europe?
I wouldn't say so necessarily, except that in America, everything is organized in a weird way. It just think about like the military. It's a lot of hierarchy and stuff like that. There's partly overlapping things. You cannot just be a rescue. You're part of either the Navy or the Coast Guard or something like that. It's all institutionalized,
I see.
and they use different boats, but that's their preference. What I
I
found
mean,
interesting
that
is
makes
that
sense.
one of the boats they use is it's a 47-foot motor lifeboat. That's the name of it. It's a very standard thing. It's just a huge boat which can basically not sink and has the required stuff on board to help people. But what was interesting is at the top it says, I'm quoting the Wikipedia page, it is there's a space at the combined center of rotation, and if needed, a light machine gun can be fitted at the front of the vessel, which is not something I think of when you are going to rescue people who are in the water.
No,
But
I
it's America.
like a a a light machine gun. The first thing that came to my mind would be to rescue people against Somali pirates, but you shouldn't you
The
shouldn't
Somali
have.
pirates, they don't really come to like Massachusetts or
No,
something. It's a bit
exactly,
too far.
exactly. That's it's a bit out of their geography. So I it's tough to imagine what they actually need them for.
Just in
May-
case.
Maybe sharks or something. Like
It's also
some.
quite a nice way to deal with sharks, I suppose, like the heavy duty stuff.
Yeah, I mean, if you really, I don't know. I yeah, like you said, this is America, right?
It's America, yes.
A
In
light
Europe,
machine
we
gun
don't have that.
seems very reasonable for them.
Yes. And what I also saw is that, of course, like nowadays, we associate rescue missions for boats usually with people who have their own boat or rent their own boat and just either messed up or were unlucky, stuff like that. So day trippers or people on their private yachts, and they need to be rescued. But why it's originally made is that because there's so many people in like the 1900s, 1800s who had to get on the sea for work, for trading, for fishing, stuff like that. And if they had to do that as well during pretty bad weather conditions, they just had to eat, which is the cause for many of these crashes and like tens of thousands of people dying. So that there was more of a necessity. It happened much more often that people had to be rescued, and now we are better prepared, I suppose.
And I suppose it also happened more for commoners, let's say. I mean, nowadays most people don't travel by boat when they travel.
No, it's more a
Uh,
luxury thing. It's not necessarily a big luxury, but it's not necessary. And if you're gonna go by boat, there's a good chance you get a fancy boat. So yes, it's less for commoners.
I see.
I don't know. Have you ever been to like the Dutch coast and then the beaches? Because there are many of these monuments about just people who died in the sea at a flood or bad weather, stuff like that.
I have been, but honestly, the only statues I can remember are from Michiel de Ruiter.
Ah,
So
yeah, that's a bit
uh,
different. Yes,
that's a whole different topic.
exactly. I've seen quite a few of those, and they indicate like how important it is to have a rescue lifeboat service because most of these deaths are avoidable.
And how are they operated, let's say, mid ocean? Because on the coast, it makes sense. You can just have people waiting on the coast, or maybe sail by the coast a little, wait for something to happen. But mid ocean seems a bit tougher.
No, absolutely. These boats are not designed to go more than even a few tens of kilometers outside the shore, and you can easily have an accident in the middle of the ocean. That's not so good. Let's put it that way. But first of all, boats that go in the middle of the ocean are usually quite large. So
I
then
see.
we're talking about their own lifeboats. You know what? Like on the Titanic, there's all these lifeboats.
Well, on the
Uh,
Titanic, there weren't enough, but I see what you mean. Yeah,
Indeed, that's also a point. They usually didn't have enough for all the passengers because they kind of assume that there are boats nearby which will rescue them if needed. And to have a very sudden accident where the boat is sinking in a matter of like minutes, that's just very, very rare. So if you have significant trouble in the middle of the ocean, you have to kind of rely on other boats nearby to rescue you, which they do. That is a pretty common thing if they are nearby.
So
I think that at least the United States makes use of helicopters instead of like these lifeboats.
yeah, but I cannot imagine a helicopter being able to travel so quickly from the United States coast to the center of the
Oh no,
Atlantic.
no, like that would be a very difficult place to get to. Um,
I see.
One thing
So
which I also found is that I thought was quite interesting. So there is also the concept of an airborne lifeboat, which is a rescue boat which is dropped by a plane. It's just straight up dropped into the ocean from a plane, and it is of course designed that it cannot sink again, something like that.
yeah,
So
I mean it's quite an action to drop a boat
yes,
from a plane.
I think that's awesome that it is possible. They used it quite a bit in the Second World War, if I'm not mistaken. And that could be used if you really urgently need some assistance pretty far from the coast. You just send a plane and you drop a boat on them.
Wow.
It's
And
quite
then
cool.
I mean, if they can wait for a few hours, then yeah, you can even reach them in the middle of the Atlantic from both Europe as well as the United States. So with such
Yeah,
boat being dropped by plane, that seems like a very effective strategy.
you need a few
To be
hours.
honest.
Of course, it's more or less impossible to get in the middle of the ocean in a matter of minutes. So the general rule of safety is if you go very far from the coast, be a bit prepared.
Yeah, just have a good boat.
Yes, that's in general a pretty good idea, I must say.
I mean, I suppose if you build a house in the middle of nowhere, then better not build it in out of flammable materials. Just make sure it
Hmm.
doesn't burn down. It's, I suppose this advice is very similar.
Exactly. And to get back on that topic about what if you're very far from others and you need some help, and to get back to Somalia, there is a nice coupling. Well, not so nice in the sense that Somali pirates often faked that they needed some assistance. So then some convoy ship or merchant ship would come by, and then the Somali pirates would just hijack the ship. So that's that's a bit of a danger of the local seas there. But that is how you can also abuse the system a bit.
I can also imagine them doing it the other way around, just pretending to be some lifeboat on the Somali or on the East African coast, and just sail around in their lifeboat, trying to find some big ships and saying that they need to get aboard somehow. Because I mean, a lifeboat is supposedly trustworthy, right?
Yes, but I would be a bit confused if some other boat says that my boat is in danger. I'm not really sure how that would work.
I'm not necessarily that they're in danger, but you know, a lifeboat, they need supplies, they need drop off some people or
Oh, yeah, okay.
whatever.
In that way, yes. Just the cooperation on sea, so to say.
Yeah, exactly. I
Yeah,
mean,
you can
the
abuse that for sure.
the only thing the Somali pirates need is to get on board, right? They need some excuse to get on board, and
Hmm.
then they're in basically.
Exactly. So there was once a pretty big story. There was a book and a film about it written, made, about one of the hijackings on Somalia. It's called Captain Phillips. That iconic scene where they say like,
I'm the
I,
captain now.
"I'm the captain," exactly.
Yeah. This one.
And there's also a connection to rescue boats there, because as a matter of fact, the Somali pirates fled on the lifeboat of the ship with one of the I think the captain or something to have as hostage. That didn't end very well.
I see. But these are different type of lifeboats, right? These are the
These are
onboard
indeed
lifeboats.
the onboard lifeboats. Yes.
Yeah. Although also important, of course, it's not our Wikipedia page
No,
of
no,
today.
absolutely. We don't want to mix it too much.
Exactly. So, is there anything else to say about these rescue
Uh,
lifeboats?
I think like the way that they usually get in the media for us is when there's something happening in the Mediterranean again, and one of those lifeboats have to like save 200 people drowning on a ship which is made for like 10 people.
I
And I
see.
think that is a very difficult situation to be in because in all reasonable ways you cannot fit all these people on your lifeboat. I don't know how they do that honestly.
I mean, probably it's just scrumming them up there. They can probably stand, just not comfortably.
Yeah, but if I just don't think you can get all these people on one single lifeboat, and maybe you brought a few, but you just don't know how many people there are gonna be that need saving. I think it's a conceivable situation that you just cannot safely fit everyone on your boat.
Oh, most likely you're right. Yeah, but then they will fit them unsafely.
Yeah, but
I
you
mean,
cannot do that too much because else your own boat is gonna sink.
mm-hmm.
I think it's a
Yeah.
very difficult situation to be in. I
Oh
don't
yeah,
envy
for
these
sure,
people.
for sure. It's uh, it's a tough dilemma, particularly if you consider that those boats then have to sail around the Mediterranean for days or weeks because no country will accept them to be ported.
Yes, yes, that is a very tricky situation. Everyone is thirsty, hungry, probably not very happy either on these places.
Hmm.
So yeah, a nasty situation to be in.
Probably also a severe lack of supplies. I mean,
Oh
I can
yes.
imagine a lifeboat having a lot of supplies, but of course not for several weeks for more than intended amount of people.
hmm hmm and I have a few other things to talk about lifeboats. So first of all, I found the Journal of the National Lifeboat Institution, just like a newspaper for lifeboat
I mean,
enthusiasts, I
the
suppose.
the National Lifeboat Association is
It's
American or UK
it's an
or
English one. Yes, that's a good clarification. But I am absolutely sure there's also an American one. I just only could find the English one online. It's like 40 pages, and it happens every month or something. They have really a lot to talk about, like lifeboats here.
it's a
Which
great association. It's I love people who are so
just
extremely
passionate.
enthusiastic and passionate about some topic which seems so extremely dull to me. It's amazing.
Exactly. Like I acknowledge it's important, but to like every month read 40 pages about lifeboats, I wouldn't do it. Some people do, and I really like that it's possible. So there's a
It's beautiful.
few nice stories there. One of them again about a lifeboat which sank itself. That's just unfortunate when that happens when you're trying to save people and then you die yourself. It's not so good. But the other one happens regarding a James Bond movie which was shot nearby. I couldn't really find the location. East Sussex, so it's in England. Yes, I couldn't really find the movie. That was what I meant. But apparently, they were doing some wild stunts with Land Rovers, which were supposed to dive into the sea from cliffs, and not so surprisingly, they messed up. So like three actors and some film crew were in like wild seas, and of course there was a lifeboat nearby. So they wrote an entire story about how they saved the James Bond movie. So they were pretty proud of that. I think that was great.
And this was a story which has happened in one of the monthly lifeboat national
Exactly. Not even a huge one.
journals.
Like it's just one of the many stories about lifeboat rescuers. But in this case, it was regarding James Bond movies.
Uh, it's such a beautiful beautiful magazine
Absolutely, like a really great concept.
for sure.
And then I have another quite nice concept, and that is competitive rescuing with lifeboats. That is something which happens in Australia. They have on the off season, which is when there are not too many people around, they have competitive championships of rescue racing, which is quite ridiculous but cool to see.
So what do? They just drop some people in the water and then they want the boats to save them, or
Yes,
what's?
exactly. If you want to take a look, they call it IRB Championship, and what they have is like a few boys in the water. I guess like 50 meters from the coast, so it's not that much. All teams have well their own boat naturally, and then like 10 meters from the person who's in the water. Every team also has a person in the water. The boat has to stop. Someone has to get out of the water to swim as fast as they can to this person and get them safely on board. Um, and the nice thing is that it happens in like these almost Olympic racing heats, really nicely set up, and people are well naturally very motivated to win. So they're I think it's a really good training, honestly.
I mean, yeah, for sure. It's like these lifeboat events are kind of low probability. They're basically doing nothing for most of the time. So I can imagine that these such events to kind of simulate these low probability events, they are of great value, at least to them, to get this training. Because, I mean, of course, the best training you get in real life, but it's almost
Yes.
impossible to train this in real life because you have to wait for something which rarely happens.
Yeah, and then you need to perform. It's almost not a training anymore if you really need to do it then. So I
Exactly.
think this is a great way to like get your competitive element in there, to take it serious and do some good training. And well, it happens every year. They get a prize for the best one in Australia to rescue people. I think that's really cool.
Is this competition open for foreigners, or is this
Ooh, very good question.
Australia only?
I don't know. I would hope so. I think it's something that should be promoted. But when they called teams, it was all like local small towns somewhere on the coast of Australia. So I think it's mostly Australians who do this. Makes
Perhaps we
sense.
can participate in the IRB Championship 2023,
Yes,
and
I
that
think
would
that's
be
an
a
excellent idea.
great experience.
Great, great experience.
So about the lifeboat Wikipedia page,
Yes.
how do you rate the page?
It looks more interesting than it actually is. I feel you just have to wonder like why would you go to the lifeboat page on Wikipedia if it is to learn about like the overview and the structure of these. You're in a good spot, but you're not going there to understand what a lifeboat is. That kind of is in the name itself.
Yeah,
It is a very dry page. It has information, but it doesn't go too much in depth on some parts. I don't think that like the National Lifeboat magazine would be very happy with this page. I think it would be maybe lacking. And on the top, it also says that the references are to general. Like there's criticism that the references are not that good, and that criticism has been here for 12 years.
it's a long time.
Yes. So I just don't think too many people care about this page, unfortunately.
Yeah. So out of 10, what would you rate it?
I still like it. It got me to some stories that I didn't know before. It was pretty interesting. I'm gonna go and give it a 6.5.
6.5 out of 10.
Yes.
So I agree with the previous statements that it's pretty dry and there's not too much to be read. Of course, I only read it very briefly, but it it was very easy to read briefly because it wasn't appealing to read further at all. Um, and I honestly, except for very specific facts, don't. I wouldn't say I've learned anything new or was entertained in any way whatsoever.
That's
So
fair.
I'm gonna go with 4.5 out of 10.
No, no, I totally understand it. I think in my rating I also put a little bit the fact that I read a bit more about it, but that's not in the page. It honestly should be in the page.
Yeah,
Well, nevertheless, Milo didn't learn too much from the page itself. We hope that you did learn something about lifeboats for rescue.
and up until till next week when we discuss our next topic, which is still to be determined.
Totally unknown right now.
Totally unknown. We'll probably figure that out within a couple days, and you'll find out next episode, whenever that may be.
How exciting!
How exciting! So, how do we sign off? Will this be our sign off as well?
I still don't know. We haven't really talked about it. Yeah.
I mean, last episode we kind of just stopped talking. But some sign off would be nice. I mean, I'll leave this in as long as we keep speaking intelligibly. We'll leave it in, but
let's think about it. I right now don't have a clear idea. Maybe we just put like an outro music on top of it.
Okay, yeah, that could work. But I mean, somehow someone has to say the last words before the outro music as well.
Yes, that's true. All right, see you next time.
Ciao.
Bye.